Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. It has been quite a while since I've made a video, and that's mostly because I've been insanely busy with work. But I have a bit of downtime and I decided to make a video about a super annoying experience that I had. So, I have been testing out Windows 11 because I heard that there are so many horrible things about it. I wanted to see if it was true, and since I got a free upgrade, well, I upgraded to Windows 11 and I've been using it for several months now. At least I did, until it started giving me blue screens after the latest update, and it would just randomly reboot all the time. And I went ahead and went into recovery mode, uninstalled the updates, and everything worked just fine again, until it decided to update itself again, and then it crashed and blue screened and repeatedly restarted over and over and over again. At this point, after doing some other troubleshooting and trying to figure out why it was doing that, I decided I was completely done with Windows and wanted to go back to using Linux. So I decided I would test out Linux Mint because I heard a lot of good things about it. I've been an Ubuntu user for many years, for over a decade. Actually, I've been using Ubuntu since right after it came out originally. After it'd been out a little bit, I guess. But since the earlier versions of Ubuntu, I've been using it. And I really liked it, but lately they haven't really been updating things very well. So almost everything in the app repository I ended up having to download manually, or using apt-get, or using other repositories to find an up-to-date version. And I've had a lot of people saying that Linux Mint is actually a lot better at this now than Ubuntu is, and that in general, Mint is a much better operating system and interface than Ubuntu is now. I used Linux Mint in the past on a laptop that I borrowed from one of my exes, and I really loved it. I found it very intuitive, and that was a pretty old version of Linux Mint, so I figured I'd give it a try and check it out. And I went to install Linux Mint, but when I went to partition the hard drive, I had a problem where it wouldn't let me delete the Windows partition. It wouldn't, it acted like it let me delete it and create new partitions, but it wouldn't actually work. And that was quite frustrating. So I ended up trying a lot of different things to get rid of the partition. And of course, before I did all this, I made sure all the drive security measures in the BIOS were disabled, so that wouldn't cause any issues with installing a new operating system. But no matter what I did, I couldn't delete Windows. I couldn't delete the partition. I couldn't format the partition. I couldn't even install a fresh copy of Windows over the partition. It would just give me errors and say that the drive wasn't accessible. So the only conclusion I can figure out from this is that the drive is just simply damaged, and it just happened to break right after a Windows update. Coincidence? Maybe, I don't know. But this is actually the second time I've had a Windows update completely destroy part of my computer, where the timing just happened to go, right along with an update. One of the Windows 10 updates that they did completely deleted one of my Linux partitions and all the data I had on it, even though it was a completely separate partition. And after losing a drive after a Windows update, there's no way I'm ever going back to Windows. So this is on my main gaming PC that I installed Linux Mint, and I was amazed at how fast the process was to install a completely functional system where all the drivers were installed and where I could game on it. It was way faster than it was on Windows. It took me like less than 10 minutes to get everything restored to the point that I could game on this, and the gaming experience is fine. using Proton, I'm able to play every game I've tried so far, even Elder Scrolls Online. That's the last one I tried. I did have to enter in one of the like a command into the launch settings, but that was like something you do once and then you never do again. And it runs. Haven't had really any major issues that would make me want to miss Windows yet, and there are a lot of great customizable features that Windows doesn't have built in, like making custom keyboard shortcuts for system things. You can adjust the volume using Control and the up arrow, which is handy because this keyboard doesn't have a volume shortcut key, because I'm using one of those 60% keyboards. Anyway, the UI is really nice and really clean, and it's very intuitive if you are a Windows user. It's very intuitive if you're used to using Ubuntu as well, or any other Linux distro. It just makes sense. I love it so far. Then the install process, it guided you through everything, even after the install, took you to the section where you can just install any proprietary drivers you want, like the drivers I had to install for my GTX 1060 6GB video card, and so far it's running flawlessly. So yeah, I did have to buy a new SSD, unfortunately, because the other one was completely dead after that Windows update for some reason, even though it was a fairly new SSD. But I have absolutely no regrets in installing Linux Mint, and compared to Ubuntu, like, it was so easy. I just had to go to the software manager to install Steam. I just type in Steam, and it installs the latest version. To what else did I install? To install Audacity, that's another thing. You just type Audacity, install it there. To install GitHub Desktop, it's another thing I use a lot for programming. It's just right there, and it installs without any issues. To install Google Chrome, you just type in Chrome, and it pops up. It's right there. You can just install it, which is not something that you can do easily in Ubuntu. You actually have to go to the Chrome website and kind of install it like you would in Windows instead, because Ubuntu doesn't have all this stuff updated, and by default, Linux Mint just has a much more up-to-date library of applications, and it's super easy. And then one thing that I was missing from using Windows before is the ability to screen record using the hardware on the GPU alone. And OBS is pretty good for doing screen recording, but it's very CPU intensive, so it's not so great for recording for games. But there's this software it's just simply called GPU Screen Recorder, and you can just install it from the software manager just by typing it in. And it's something that one individual just made, and that's what I'm using to record this right now. So this is not using the CPU really to do this. It's using the GPU, just like NVIDIA's native software does. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Stray, because it's pretty easy video game to launch, and just show you how well this launches. So this is a game that was made for Windows, but it's running through Proton. It has been verified to work on the Steam Deck, and from what I've seen, even games that haven't been verified to work on the Steam Deck, they run fine. Sometimes they require some tweaking, but the only game I haven't really been able to get to run very well in Linux, I think, is Ark Survival Evolved, but that is the developer's fault, because they've done kind of a crappy job at updating the software, but the funny thing is it won't run because it's actually a native Linux game that the developers just haven't updated correctly. So that has nothing to do with Linux at all. It's the problem with the developers of that game. So I'll run into some issues like that. So here we are running Stray. And as you can see, I'm getting a pretty steady 60 FPS on a game that was made for Windows. So if I were to recommend a Linux distribution, I would definitely recommend Linux Mint. After having used Ubuntu for so many years, this is just an amazing experience. The setup was so easy. It was way easier than setting up a gaming PC on Windows is, and I really don't know why people complain about gaming on Linux. I know there are some issues where some games don't run as well as they would on Windows, but overall this is a much better experience. Now if you have like cutting edge brand new hardware, chances are you might have more driver issues and things like that than you would experience on older hardware. I mean, my processor isn't super old. It's a 10th gen Intel i3 10100. And my GPU is quite old. It's been around for a while, the GTX 1060, but it's still a very functional video card for the price that I paid for it. So if you're looking to get rid of Windows, I would definitely recommend Linux Mint. It was the most painless Linux install I've ever seen. They've really improved it a lot since I used it last, and I'm just loving it. It is just great. And they have a few different flavors of Linux Mint. This is the cinnamon flavor, so I would go with that because I think it's the most mainstream and accessible. And it looks really great. Anyway, that's all I have for today. I hope you found this video at least informative and useful. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and try out Linux Mint. Bye then.